Let me call him.
All right, so we are.
She says, please ask host to let me in. I'm there, she says.
Oh, okay.
Maybe now so everybody can go off the video except Shamala and Subha.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Dr. Bhagat, we are all on the call. You're just playing some slides in the background for now, and then we'll give everybody 5 minutes to join, and then we'll start, Dr. Bhagat. This is Shamla.
All right.
Hi, so is this any better? Because I am unable to join with phone audio. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
This is good.
Oh, Dr. Bhagat. Okay, great. So I'll just use earphones, I think.
Who is this?
Dr.
That will
Bhagat,
come in?
Hermione that was asking to make sure that the audio was okay. And then to everybody who's joining, I'm Shamla, and I'm just we're just giving everybody a few minutes before we start the event. So thank you for joining.
Very good.
Over to you, Shamla.
Can we go ahead and start? Should we give a few more minutes? Just going to give people 1 more minute and then I'll start.
I think we can start, Shamla, now. We have almost 30 people.
Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shamla Gopalan, a volunteer with ATC Metro Chapter, and I'm very honored to be the person to welcome you all to our very first virtual Milan. I want to say something right off the bat. It is indeed very strange for me to be addressing you, looking at my camera on the computer screen, instead of our usual setting where I could be looking at you in your evening's best, enjoying some nice Indian appetizers. But 2020 has been such a year, a lot of firsts, and we are discovering interesting and creative ways to connect with everybody. Well, no Indian appetizers this time, but I hope you're all joining us after your nice morning coffee or chai and breakfast. A lot of you may have been to Milan in the previous years, and for some of you, this may be the first. We thank you all for taking time on your precious weekend to join us. I would like to introduce AID to all of you by sharing my journey with AID. It only seems like yesterday, but it was really 10 years ago that I first signed up to volunteer for AID, not really knowing much about the organization at the time. I remember the very first meeting of AID that I did attend. It was at one of our volunteers' house, Dr. Bhagat's house in the basement. And the first two volunteers I met outside his house, Eureka ji and Srinivas, are in fact on the call with us today. And it was at this meeting that the very idea for Milan was being floated around and discussed. And so it was the very, 10 years ago, the very first Milan was the very first event that I volunteered for. And it appears that I never left. I remember vividly at that day being in awe, looking at the generosity and goodwill of people at the event. And I was so pumped to be part of this new world of AID. And the one thing that really drew me to AID were the people, the courage and passion that the volunteers and AID as an organization has to stand up for social justice, its commitment to work with communities that are often forgotten, and its drive to bring about change in India. But most of all, the holistic approach of AID. Because in AID, we don't believe we work with not just in one area, but like agriculture, education, environment, health, human rights, livelihood, or relief work, we work on all of them. Because we believe to really address the root cause of the problem, we need to work on all of these issues and not just one. And AID DC Metro chapter itself is very special because AID as an organization started in this very area almost 30 years ago at University of Maryland College Park, founded by Ravi Kuchimanchi when he was a graduate student at University of Maryland at the time. So we are very proud to be part of the chapter where it all began. AID DC Metro chapter in the past year has supported about 8 different projects spanning across various regions in India and are working on issues like agriculture, education, environment, livelihood, and relief work. And today we are going to share a short video that is going to showcase some of the projects that we have supported over the past year, and you hear from some of our volunteers in this video. Shivayan?
So Aranyika is one of the oldest projects in this chapter. It's been empowering tribal youth and women for development in their communities. And AID shares this vision to motivate and nurture these people to fight for what's right in their communities. So I was wondering, what is the latest update from this project?
During the COVID-19 crisis, Aranyika stepped up to the plate and started awareness campaigns and distribution of food and essential goods to more than 500 families. Some of you may have had the chance to, in May, to hear from Malini about how the tribal communities are coping with the pandemic.
Children of sex workers face discrimination, danger, and uphill battles to access food, health, and education. Nishta, an organization based in West Bengal, runs a shelter called Sinchan, whose work we have learned about over the years. Sonika Aunty, do you have any updates?
Yes, Khayali. In fact, ADC volunteer Ratna Day just visited Sinchan in Baruipur, Bengal. Sinchan, as you noted, is a facility for sex workers' children in this area. About 40 children between the ages of 2 to 14 come here and receive safe foster care. But arguably the more critical role that Sinchan plays in this area is to provide a safe haven to these children from the dangerous environment that they're growing up in.
Chintan works with another one of our nation's heroes, the waste pickers. We've been supporting the efforts of Chintan to train waste pickers on advocating for an inclusive waste management policy, training the residents of Delhi on waste management, and phasing out children from this profession, enabling them to go to school. Let's hear about their work last year.
Last year, Chintan collaborated with the North Delhi municipality to make sure that waste pickers get greater access to social security. They also train and certified waste pickers on safety, first aid, and recycling, and this made sure that they were able to serve the Delhi's population better. They also worked with the waste pickers to make sure that their children are able to join the North Delhi schools. And as you heard in May, when COVID struck, Chintan's frontline workers distributed ration and hygiene kits to more than 30,000 people and families, most of them from the waste picker community.
Founded in 2015, Sisters Living Works is a non-profit organization dedicated to the prevention of suicides in India. India has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. The mission of this organization is to raise awareness of this epidemic, to provide suicide prevention education, resources, and to get involved in advocacy. Our chapter has been supporting Sisters Living Works for the past 3 years. Sureka ji will now talk about their work last year.
Thank you, Saria. In just a few years since its inception, Sisters Living Works, or SLW for short, has connected with 35,000 people, conducted over 100 activities, and has about 40 active volunteers. Now, as you can imagine, amid the pandemic, 2020 has seen a sharp decline in mental health worldwide due to anxiety, uncertainty, and hopelessness. Well, SLW sprang into action and has offered online workshops and support groups with greater frequency to meet the increased demand. People from all over the world have been reaching out to them for help.
Hello, Mr. Vikram. Gadam Education Initiative is one of our newest projects. You are also one of AID's newest volunteers. What can you tell us about KEI?
KEI is an initiative of the Center for Development, which works in Ahmedabad city on issues of education, child labor, gender, and livelihoods. COVID has increased the importance of KEI's work. Apart from the economic hardship faced by the families also are having a difficult time moving to the online-only education model adopted by most schools. Without the necessary resources needed for remote-only education, girls are being deprived of not only education but also the much-needed counseling support. KRCG has distributed tablets to all of these girls and has worked to develop customized education sessions so that families with spotty internet connections at home can also access education.
Shamla, back to you.
Yes, okay, thank you, Subayan. Before we move on to the next and most awaited part of our event, I just want to share a few housekeeping rules. This event is actually live on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll be sharing the links in the chat window. So you're welcome to spread the word by sharing those links. And also, the other thing I want to mention is that I know, like, as the speakers share their work, we might have a lot of questions about the work that you would want to ask them. So we encourage you to please post your questions on the chat window. We'll keep track of them, and we'll definitely try to address them before the end of the event. Okay, so to the next most awaited part of the event, I'm very honored to have both. We are very honored and thankful to have two amazing speakers join us from India today, and I have had the good fortune of hearing from both of them in the past, and they're truly, truly inspiring. Our very first speaker is Balaji Sampath. Balaji started his journey with AID when he was a graduate student here at the University of Maryland, College Park. He was a volunteer as a student, and he was instrumental in starting several chapters across the US. In 1997, Balaji wanted to move back to India to work full-time on social issues, and that's how he became our AID's very first Jeevan Saathi, a program within AID that supports individuals who want to move back to India to work full-time on social issues. After his move to India, Balaji started AID India, which is about over 25 years ago. He's a recipient of many awards in India and US, and he has been instrumental in starting several initiatives in India in the areas of education, health, relief, and rehabilitation. The most notable among them are the Eureka Child Initiative that works on education, and the relief and rehabilitation work that Aid India did after tsunami in 2004, most recently the super rainstorms in Tamil Nadu, and of course now during COVID. I'm now, without much further ado, I would like to invite Balaji to take the virtual stage.
Thank you, Shamla. And it's always wonderful to come back to, in some way, at least virtually, come back to UMCP, Maryland, and College Park area, DC area. So I spent some lot of fun years there doing my college days, PhD days, and so on, and a lot of friends that it's been the relationship has continued and continues to sustain me in many ways. So it's real pleasure to come back and manage to interact with people again. So wonderful to thank you for inviting me and for making me part of this meeting today. So without going too much into other things, I would like to get started on our work that we have been doing as part of Aid India. Because many times before I've talked about our education work as well as the work that we have done with homes and children and families in different parts of Tamil Nadu particularly. Basically today I'm going to focus on COVID relief activities. But the real point I wanted to emphasize is that when you do the regular work that you're doing, education work, health work, women's empowerment work, etc., you find that the ability then becomes built in the organization to also handle relief activities. So for example, a lot of what we are talking about today, what I'm going to be presenting about our COVID work would not have been possible if in every village we did not have a volunteer. Because as soon as we had the COVID lockdown happening, the very first thing was there are a lot of people started calling me and saying that in my village, there are 3-4 people, families who have not had any food. They don't have any food, so they can't eat today, they can't eat tomorrow. So what do we do? So almost like within like a day of the lockdown, we started getting information about specific families that needed food provision. Now, how do these people know those families? Because we are conducting education sessions. We have been conducting that for many years in these villages. So the fact that there is one program running is actually the base for a lot of relief activities, any emergency requirement. All of that gets done because of that. So I would like to start by emphasizing the fact that continuing regular development activities in villages, keeping in touch constantly, this is not something that is a one-off activity. So when we do that, a lot of other possibilities open up, particularly when there is an emergency, there is requirement like COVID relief, etc. In fact, I remember that Ravi had organized a meeting with a lot of aid volunteers and had talked about going into the villages and making sure that we can create like a model for keeping social distance. And while we started doing that, we realized that there are all these issues because we started asking our people to just walk around, find out, and they came back saying, people are hungry, what do we do? Like, how do I reach out? So within even first 1-2 days. So I would like to start with a small presentation of what we have done pre-COVID and maybe connect that to what we are doing at this point. I know that we don't have too much time, so I'll try to keep it short. So basically, I hope everybody can see my screen. And our typical work has been in about 1,000 villages, 1,063 villages, and we work with about 80,000 children. One of the main programs that we have been focusing on is the Eureka education program. It has multiple components, but the main overall component is to make children enjoy learning. To assess and to find out how much they have learned is one part, but a lot of activities, games. So we have in every village, we have like a volunteer like this girl who's teaching that child, or a teacher like this person who's basically working and conducting a class. So we have volunteers who conduct classes in that village. So somebody local presence. Many of them are going as college students also. And then we have people from 2-3 villages who walk around to every village. And 4-5 villages, they basically take responsibility for. So there is some coordination structure, and both were very, very critical when we started looking at our COVID relief activity. Our usual activities are focused like this on making children enjoy the learning process. And of course, we also look at a skill assessment for every child. So this one gives you each child how many skills the child has got, what skills the child has not yet got, etc. And then there is a event in the village where we involve a lot of people. Like, for example, these 4 girls are college students. We got about 2,000 volunteers last year. This year, of course, none of that was possible, to visit each village and conduct a small skill assessment, and then a small village level activity where the children are given some kind of recognition, certificate, etc. So the skill charts are very important part of our education work. And then getting the community involved is a super important part of the work, where after the children have learned a little bit of, for example, English or mathematics, they walk around in the community and talk to the elders. They may not know English, but they say, "Party, tell me what is this." So they start having the conversation, and that we told them that you go there and try to teach your adults, teach your parents, teach family members, people around you. Huge amount of pride comes in the community, saying, "My child is speaking. My child is speaking in English. My child is able to do a drama." So every weekend, we generally have a role play like that. Makes a big difference in terms of getting the community to understand what the children are learning in the education centers. One of the things that we do in the education centers is also to run these kinds of tinkering labs, get a cycle mechanic to come and teach these girls how to repair cycles, how to basically take apart a mobile and connect it back. Amount of concentration that kids get in these kinds of activities is something that you have to see to believe. It's like they learn it so well. Many of these villages that we have been working in are extremely poor families. Like typically 3,000-4,000 rupees is the monthly income of the family. So you're talking about something which is less than $50 a month as a family income in some of the villages. Some villages maybe about $100 a month. And one of the programs that we started after the Tamil Nadu floods and after we did the flood relief was to start constructing pakka houses. And we have so far constructed about 450 houses. Now, many of the people have been living in huts like this for maybe 20 years, 15 years, 25 years. Many of these are irregular communities, tribal families, people who get kind of hounded from one village to another because they feel like they should not stay here. Once this part of the village becomes the rest of the community, the richer community comes in here, they push these people out. And what we do is to now basically talk to the village panchayats, get a document and basically arrange for them a pakka house like this. So Sudha's house now looks like this, and she's contributed in the process of building such a house. Similarly, we look at particularly single women, old people, people with disability. So we have now identified many such families and constructed pakka houses for them. And so this is one of the activities that we have been doing from 2015 onwards. And so far we have constructed totally 450 houses like this, pakka houses. And of course, this year we have not been able to do much. We have only been, now we have restarted about 4 to 5 houses, but not much progress happened in the beginning of the first few months of the year. Now let me get to the Corona relief activities. Because immediately after the lockdown was announced, we started looking at food provisions, and some of this data may be a little old, about 16,000 families in 1,260 plus villages. What we focused on was not to go to a village and provide rations, dry rations. So basically in every house, we provided dry ration. So first thing people started asking us was, how are you able to do it? It's in the lockdown. 2 things. One, we had people right in each village. So actually there's a direct phone call to that village asking them, or sometimes we'll ask them to come, or one of the volunteers nearby would just visit. First, make a quick survey and find out who are the people in the village who are going hungry. Like for example, this woman is going hungry. It doesn't mean that people living in the neighboring area are going hungry, because they may have got ration rice, but she doesn't have anybody to support her. She not managed to even go to the ration shop. Even if government provided food in that village, some of the people did not get it. So people like this, we identified. Our volunteers like Sumati and Vanita, they went in. Sumati, Vanita, Devi, lot of people like that. They go to the village, make sure that they identify these people, and then provide them the rations for, in the beginning, 15 days. After that, again, one more round, totally about 1 month, 3 weeks to 4 weeks of rice, dal, oil, etc., which they can cook and eat at home. So dry rations is what we started focusing on. we did a little bit in the city. Then we found a lot of people in Chennai started doing a lot of cooked meals, etc. So we said our point is to focus on the gap areas. So again, we went into villages. Focus was to identify specific families. So that's why, though it is 16,000 families, it is spread out over 1,200 villages. Like for example, some villages like this particular hamlet, 16 families. By the time that day we visited, which was probably sometime around the middle of the lockdown, they had not eaten for 7 days. They had just got some powder, mixed it with water, and were eating. And so immediately we organized it for the 16 families. We did not only work in the villages that we were already present in. We started working in nearby areas, so spread out all over Tamil Nadu. And we began to also work with other organizations that we are in partnership with. In Madhya Pradesh, for example, in Srikakulam, our own organization is there in Andhra Pradesh. So therefore, there we started working. In Orissa, with a lot of partner organizations, we started working. In Madhya Pradesh, in Assam. And of course, I should first say that AIDUS always comes up right in the beginning, even before the problem becomes a problem, and volunteers start saying, what kind of help do you need? We didn't even know we needed help. Okay, they said, can you, I got a call. By the time we were trying to figure out, is it possible for us to deliver? I got a call from volunteers in the US saying, if you need funds, let us know. We will basically immediately send something and we'll start arranging. In fact, a couple of people started sending us the money directly. And at that time, I didn't even know whether we can deliver. And it took us about 4 or 5 days of first going out, reaching the food before we could communicate to volunteers back in the US saying that please do raise money because we need the support. But I'm very happy about the fact that AIDUS, particularly the volunteers all over the US, and I think Maryland and College Park always takes the lead in this, jump up and before the problem even gets, before the solution is ready, they start looking at how they can help. I think that is very, very critical. Volunteers and donors have basically played a huge role in our being able to reach out. So for example, in a lot of places, this is a blind colony. It's called the blind colony, where a lot of families are living together. Blind people are living together. And so basically we have been we provided a lot of this kind of relief support. And similarly here as well, this is corporation sweepers. So targeted intervention in many of these areas. After the first lockdown ended and people were allowed to go back to work, what we realized was many families were not able to go back to work. Vegetable vendors like this lady in Kaveri Pakam. So when Samu started doing this relief work, she said, basically all the money I had, I have spent. I don't have any money to start my livelihood again. So we then basically said, let's get into a mode where we can provide them seed capital, because they had money earlier. It was entrepreneurs who were running small, like vegetable vendors, fruit sellers, and so on. They used up the money during the lockdown because the lockdown kept getting extended. So we said, now let us try to provide them. In the beginning, it was only like 2,000-3,000 rupees. About 3,000 rupees you start. Once they start doing the enterprise, we may again provide another about 2,000 rupees. So 3,000 to 5,000 rupees is what they need. So less than $100 to get restarted. But restarting means so many things, because restarting their livelihood means they're no longer dependent on somebody else providing them food. Second, they're not just supporting themselves, they're supporting their entire family. Makes a huge difference. So we started doing this. About 1,500 families, 1,500, mostly women. We got them to start. This is, of course, vegetable vending is one of the activities. This lady, for example, Anandi, she was a teacher, school teacher. She lives with her father and her 2 daughters. And basically, like, she was working as a school teacher, earning about 5,000 rupees. That 5,000 was the money that was supporting her father and her 2 daughters. She lost the job immediately after the lockdown. During the lockdown itself, they told her that she's not going to be, the school is not going to start, so she's not going to get a job, keep her job. So she was like completely at a loss, because if she doesn't earn, there is no support, because the father is quite old. And so what we did was to help her start a tiffin center. We worked with her, try to understand what she can do. Online teaching and all was not possible. So she was not able to do anything else. So we said, we'll help you start a tiffin center just outside her house. We got a small place and some 300 rupees rent. And then she's now running a small tiffin center and people come and eat there. So this is one example. So you can see about 1,500 plus families we have been able to help get them restarted. This work is something that we are now consistently doing. helping people cook. There's so much to be done. I mean, like, for example, as we now do this, every block that we are working in, we now work in close to 18 districts of Tamil Nadu. In every district and several blocks, we work in almost like 50, 55 blocks now. So each block, people come back to us and saying, can I do this? Government officers are coming. I know these 5 people are struggling. I know that I heard that you guys have been helping out those people. Can you also help these people? So that kind of connection is now happening, and a lot of people are coming back. We're also trying to see if we can set up a model where we can give this as a loan. In the beginning, we didn't feel that it could be a loan because they had no food, they had no material, and you're talking about 3,000-4,000 rupees. But that seed capital, once they start returning, we can now create like a small pool where they can give it to somebody else. So something like that is also something we are exploring. I don't want to call this a loan. I want to call this a grant support at this stage, because this is something that needs to reach out. It's a very small amount of money for them to help them get restarted, but it really makes a big difference for them and their family. And for example, this girl, when we met her, she was really struggling in her village. She had lost her husband about 2 days, 2-3 months before we met her in April. And basically with 2 kids, she was finding the whole thing really tough. So we helped her move to her mother's village, because this village where she was in her husband's village, she had no support at all. And even that village is a really poor area. So we helped her start a tiffin center, and she has been running tiffin centers in her village now. And she's also started a small shop. Now, in fact, we're trying to help her because it's a very, very small village, may not be able to sustain this continuously. So we're also trying to see if we can get her a job nearby so she can go and work there. So recently we started kitchen gardens. Like, how do you improve nutrition for people? So we started looking at kitchen gardens. I was initially very skeptical. I was wondering whether people will be able to do this and so on. But some people in our team said, no, we have to get this started. And very quickly, they scaled up to now about 2,600 families have started kitchen gardens all over Tamil Nadu. In fact, this is a little bit older, because every day I keep getting news that we have started another about 10, 15 plots. So we provide them seeds and help them get started. And then once they get started, they keep continuing. So some of them have started selling this. Some of them have started eating this. So almost all of them started eating vegetables at home, which I think makes a big difference in terms of the nutrition. One problem that we have been working on earlier, which is education. We realized that we couldn't do very much in the current period. Now, of course, recently we started also conducting distance-based kind of classes. But first thing was can I use technology to reach out to these children? So we looked at 2 models. One is to look at the live model. Everywhere people were looking at online education as basically live classes. So we did work with orphanages and got started like about 650 children in orphanages. Our team has been conducting classes for them, English classes, math classes. That is live, because that is one place where we can conduct it with a projection and so on. But the real solution is that we need to basically reach them in a way in which where it is not like a Zoom session like this. It has to be something where it can be done offline. So one-time download, because many children, we realized, we did a small survey and found about 45% children have access to mobile phones for only 1 hour. Okay, but they will be able to get an access to it. So if we can have a downloaded lesson that they can see anytime during the day, when they get access, they'll be able to see it. So we started developing, we made a modification of one of the apps that we had developed. We developed the app, and now about 16,000 children have been using it. They sit in wherever they go to some place near a tree where they download the lesson. Then they go back to their house, sit and watch. I made a video. Okay, so on fractions. Now I get a lot of very interesting feedback from these children about how they are using every day. And it is really thrilling to see how much they have learned. It is not just videos with a lot of animated lessons and so on. So this girl is now trying out a problem. She'll work it out, enter the answer. It will tell her whether it's right or wrong. Then she can see a solution and then go to the next question. So kids have really improved through this process. So this is basically what we have been doing. There's a lot more to be done, because particularly after COVID, there is a huge need to look at both livelihood, education, nutrition. All 3 are very critical areas. So our team has been focusing a lot on all of these 3 areas. So basically with this, I know I probably have exceeded my time quite a bit, so I'll stop. But we are also hoping that soon we should be able to look at not just the relief activity and rehabilitation activities. Probably we should be able to also go back So recently we started like because there are some children, for example, who do not even have access to even this one mobile. So we started having a TV, local TV through the mobile. They connect it and get kids to one central location where they maintain reasonable distance, and then they are able to see it. We, of course, also did a lot of work in providing hospitals. Many hospitals did not even have basic requirements like masks and simple, like for example, in one of the hospitals, we provided not ventilators, but breathing equipment and so on. And so PPE kits for many of the hospitals and so on. So those kinds of things have also been happening, but that's something that a lot of others have also been working on. So we focused a lot on primary health centers, rural district hospitals, etc. So to provide that. But over time, our focus has been on working with the poorest. And amongst the poorest, 3-4 things. One is to continue providing food in places where they do not have access. Like for example, August 15th, while the country was celebrating Independence Day, we realized that lots of families were still not even having food to eat. So we identified another about close to 1,800 families, and again did one more round of food supply, just so that we wanted to finish it by August 15th. So we did that, and then we were very happy to finish that particular round, because that way we could say actually we could talk about Independence Day with some amount of food in people's stomachs. So that food supply is something as and when requirement comes up, and it's going to keep coming up because the economy has been shattered, particularly for the poorest. Many of them have not got back the jobs. So that is one area we are focusing on. The second important area is very, very critical, helping people rehabilitate their livelihood, getting them back on their feet. I think that is extremely critical. Lot of women and children, the nutrition, and of course men also, but women and children particularly, the nutrition levels have dropped. So providing nutrition in the village, making sure that children have access to vegetables, access to better quality food, more food, first of all. I think that is again very, very critical. And of course, looking at education, because that has been our primary area of work. I feel that many kids, unfortunately, have forgotten. Lockdown period has been very extended. So they have forgotten even the basics they have learned, because it's fragile quality of learning. So looking at not just technology based, but technology plus handholding, support, etc. Like for example, now our volunteers call up 5 children every day and make sure that 1 hour slots where they go through workbooks and so on with them. So combination of all of this needs to be done to make sure that people get back on their feet. So I think recovery from COVID is going to be a long process. And it is very important that, see, I'm sometime, while I'm happy that aid volunteers and donors jump in immediately, looking at the kind of money that aid has raised, because when I was discussing that, I think it is very, very small compared to the problem, particularly the COVID situation. Nationally, see, when you look at disaster like tsunami, the amount of money that was raised for the tsunami, you're talking about one area, like Tamil Nadu and a little bit of Andhra was affected. If you're talking about cyclone, one place is affected. When you're talking about COVID and the lockdown, you're talking about the whole country being affected. The whole world is, of course, affected. But if you take India as a whole, every part of India has been affected in a terrible way. So everywhere there is a need to make a big impact. And the kind of money that aid has raised is not at all sufficient. Government is putting in some amount of efforts here and there, but they're not reaching the poorest. They're not just not, I mean, the government machinery, when you're looking at gaps, government machinery is not reaching the gap people, right? I mean, that's the whole point. So organizations like aid need to raise a lot more money. I'm telling the volunteers also, I know that you're putting effort. I'm not trying to say that you're not raising, but I feel that there is a lot more requirement to do that, because there is a need for huge amount of relief support that needs to continue. Like, for example, from Assam, people have been saying that we need a lot more support there. I know that in West Bengal and Orissa, aid has been doing a lot of work, but there has been so much destruction that has happened in West Bengal. Now, along with the cyclone and so on, flooding, cyclone, so much has happened in those areas. Along with COVID, it has been a big disaster. So I feel that we need to seriously raise a lot more support, because the amount of resources that has been raised so far, at least from what I've seen, is not at all sufficient. That is because you need the recovery period easily. I would say the amount of destruction that has happened in education, in livelihood, just the fact nutrition, health problems that people are going to have, not COVID, non-COVID related. Like, we have destroyed people's immunity. And so the people now, if they get COVID, their chances of even surviving becomes harder. And after, if they survive, their lungs are now much more weaker. So we need to look at health. We need to look at nutrition. We need to look at building immunity. We need to look at all of these issues much more seriously. I would say that we are looking at least a 3-year, 4-year rehabilitation program. Just relief rehabilitation needs to continue, including the regular work as well, because that regular work itself for the poorest was like relief and rehabilitation. So I think that we need to seriously look at this as a something that requires a lot more than the resources that aid now has. So I strongly ask donors to put in as much of donations and support for initiatives like this, because what aid is doing, I've been following aid. It has been, for example, on migration, we were not able to work too much. We managed to get a bunch of people who were trying to go back, arranged train and transport, etc. But our team was very busy with the other aspects. So we still did reaching out food to migrants, we did. But the rest of the thing we were not able to. But aid was supporting organizations in Madhya Pradesh and connected us with some of them. And it was fantastic amount of work that they have done. I feel that this connected kind of work that aid is doing from the US, coordinating it, I think needs to continue. Focus on it. Think of it as 3 years of relief and rehabilitation. I know it's very tiring to think of it that way, but it is needed. Okay. I know I probably have way exceeded my time. Sorry for, and thanks for your patience, and I'll stop at this point.
Thank you so much, Balaji, for all the important work that Aid India is doing, being in the front lines and anticipating what is needed and laying it bare really for us, the need of the hour. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing your work with us. And I just wanted to encourage everybody to continue to post their questions in the chat window, so we are making note of them, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. And from one amazing speaker to the next, I'm honored to introduce to you our next speaker, Kamaini Swami. Kamaini has started delving seriously in the field of social change and development as a master's student at Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Bombay. It was at this time in 1999 that she first came across AID when Ravi and Arvinda from AID were there at Tata Institute for the screening of Narmada Dairy. And after that, when she moved to the US in 2003 for her education, she met her partner, Ashish, and discovered that he was a volunteer of AID Milwaukee and started volunteering for AID at the time. Kamaini moved to India in 2006 to focus her efforts full-time on social issues. And she started as an AID associate Jeevan Sati with AID, and now she's a full-time Jeevan Sati. Kamaini has been working in the field of social change and justice for the past decade. In 2008, she became part of an effort to mobilize workers in Bihar to form a rural workers trade union called Jan Jagran Shakti Shankatan. JJSS for short. JJSS has empowered the rural communities in North Bihar to struggle for their basic rights, and who are so easily denied, by rampant corruption and vested interests. The work of JJSS has helped workers get work through Eureka and avoid distress migration. And it has also led to greater awareness of the rights of the rural poor. Kamaini feels that JJSS, with its gender, caste, and class lens, has tried its best to build a democratic and progressive organization within while fighting the system outside. Without much further ado, I'm going to invite Kamaini now to join and share her work with us. Kamaini?
Yes. Thank you, Shamla. So it's a great honor and a pleasure to be with all of you here today and learning the virtual ropes. I was in an AID DC Metro Milan in 2016, and I'm so happy that I'm back again. These are very difficult times. In fact, for obvious reasons, this whole idea of social distancing, human beings are social beings, so it's very difficult, but it's just about physical distancing, because that's how I always think about the AID community. There is no social distance. I've always found a lot of support in the AID community, and it's only been a physical distance, but we've always learned how to deal with the physical distance and yet aspire for the same thing, for a better and more just world. It is especially difficult being from Bihar. And during this crisis, we were in touch with Balaji and got a lot of help in Tamil Nadu. Bihar has the largest probably out migration numbers. Bihar government itself said that there were 30 lakh people who had come back to Bihar. So basically who were working outside and who were back during the COVID crisis. You can imagine the stress on the economy. So I thought about making my presentation in 3 parts. In the first part, I try and talk about what migrant workers went through. In the second part, I'll try and focus on what the JJSS as an organization was able to do, echoing much of the sentiment of what the previous, what Balaji was saying about how a pre-existing organization with its ethics, ethos, and volunteers makes an immense difference in how the work gets done. And finally, I'll talk briefly about one major impact of COVID, which usually gets missed, I mean, in the Indian context, is the kind of barriers it has created for access to justice. It's difficult anyway, but how it's become even more difficult. I'd like to start with two stories. The first story is of Arun Yadav. Arun is a unorganized sector worker. He's from one of our districts in which our organization works. Arun goes every year, he migrates to Delhi and he pulls a rickshaw. Yes, so he's basically a rickshaw puller in Delhi. And every year for the last few years, he has been saying, this time I will not go, my knees hurt too much. But each time he goes back. He goes back because that is the only economically viable way for him to exist and his family to survive. In these COVID times, he was again caught in Delhi. And the first crisis he faced with the group of people he was living with was food. The Delhi government was giving food at its centers, cooked food, but it would take hours standing in a line with very little physical distancing for him to get that food, and sometimes not be able to get that food. So first, second, he needed to register to come back to Bihar, and that registration process was online, and he again needed help in doing that. Third, when he did actually get onto a train and was to get back to Bihar, it took him 3 full days. A 24 to 36-hour journey took 3 full days to reach Bihar. And as soon as he reached Bihar, he went to a quarantine center, which was a school with very, very minimal provisions. So there wasn't enough food, there wasn't healthy food, the physical surroundings were not very clean, and things like those. And at each of these stages, the organization would chip in. So the first thing was getting him dry rations from groups and networks working in Delhi. Second was helping in the registration itself online so that he could get back to Bihar. Third, in the quarantine center, how to negotiate the situation and inform the administration, get those responses and work for the betterment of that center. But Arun is again now thinking of going back to Delhi. One would assume that he has this knee problem which has been there, and now with the COVID and the crisis, he may not want to go back, which is very correct, but he has no option but to go back. And he's been forced to go back. The second story is of Mohammad Bechan. He's a young man, not been through too much formal schooling. He had gone to somewhere near Delhi where he was going to pick up a trade, and then, so he was doing a kind of internship. But when the time came for him to work and start earning, the lockdown was announced. And so he couldn't earn, he had to come back. He didn't want to go back to Delhi or to Punjab, Haryana, but again, he was forced because of the economics, and the only viable way is out migration. And Bechan is now back in Panipat, which is near Delhi. And he's also been through an illness in which he's had fever and he had coughing, and it could have been COVID, but we will not know because no tests were done. And so that also indicates a kind of situation. In both these stories, what is amply clear is people who did not want to go back had to go back. And when they were caught in the lockdown in the cities that they were in, they were unable to sustain themselves and therefore were sent back or got back themselves. Now, what exactly happened, just to get the context of why people had to go through these kinds of harrowing times in COVID? What was the actual crisis? On 30th January, the World Health Organization had said that this was a global emergency. And on 22nd March, the Prime Minister of the country announced the Janta curfew, self-imposed curfew, and people were very forthcoming and they were amazingly responsive to this call. But 2 days later, the government gave 4 hours notice and put a lockdown. So no one was prepared. People were not prepared because they didn't have enough time. And the government was not prepared probably because it didn't envisage, it didn't think through its decision. There were no public consultations. Senior think tank institutions were set aside for this idea of immediate lockdown. And the crisis that we saw then of the workers was more of a crisis created by this situation of non-thoughtful imposition of a lockdown. There were some very good studies during this period which were done. 2 of these are notable. One is the APU, the Azim Premji University, and one is a network, a voluntary network called SWAN. Both these studies gave concrete data on what people went through. So this is the macro data of the stories of Arun, Bechan, and many others. And the concrete macro data was that APU says 66% people lost their employment. Out of this, 71% in urban areas lost employment and 59% in rural areas. Now, you can imagine, and over 70% had to take a cut. So of those who even held jobs or work were also having to face pay cuts. 77% families reported saying that they were consuming less than what they had been consuming before the lockdown. Both these, I think these are already come up in the chat, both these reports of the APU and SWAN, if any of you want to have a look at some point. On the 19th of April, the Ministry of Home Affairs finally did come up with an SOP, standard operating procedure for movement of migrants and workers. But like the Arun story, there are many of the harrowing journeys and many more which were brought out by the media in which lives were lost. Over 600 lives were lost during the COVID, not because of the infection, but how the system was unable to take the crisis. And honestly, I always like to start talking about COVID by saying that COVID did not break systems in our country. In fact, COVID just removed the curtain over broken, damaged systems. And I'm now going to go on to what the JJSS was part of, and then we can hear more of the broken system. In fact, today, as I went on this call, I was very tense. And that's because one of our young intern volunteers was diagnosed with multiple illnesses, not COVID, and it was so difficult to access healthcare for her. It took the whole day for her to get hospitalized. She was recommended hospitalization, but the government facility said they did not have any beds. So she was outside in the sun for 5 to 6 hours before she could be attended to. And it's only just before the call that she's finally been admitted to the hospital. I'm not sure if there are many others. For this one Nisha who got admitted, there are many others who would not get that admission. So what was it that the JJSS did? Before I jump into that, just to give you a brief idea, Shamla has already given you an idea, but the Janjagran Shakti Sangathan, the JJSS, is a workers' union, a collective of unorganized sector workers. And we've been working in our areas of North Bihar for over a decade. And like Balaji was saying, that really helps in doing the same work that needs to be done, but in a more dignified way. While sometimes we really tend to take the dignity away from the working people of our country, and that's not very fair. The first thing we did was that we helped people from Bihar and Jharkhand across the country by putting them in touch with local groups like Aid India in Tamil Nadu and many other groups across the country. And we were amazed at how many people, how many organizations, how many individuals just responded and wanted to help. And they did help people access dry rations, access train journeys, help them with their physical registrations, their online registrations, get them to medical facilities when they needed to. Because migrants, unlike people who are left behind in villages, are not embedded in a community. If they get into a crisis, they don't have a network outside the few workers who come from that state. So everything else outside is alien to them. It's not their home. They are guests in that place, but rarely treated like guests. Sometimes the administration was also responsive. Some states, especially like Himachal Pradesh, were better than others in responding to crisis. The second thing that we did try and do was give dry rations to people in need, to families in need. So we would make these packs, and then while practicing physical distancing, we would try and ensure that the essentials reached them. This was done for over 5,000 families. And the best part was that it was done in a very dignified way. Many times coupons were distributed beforehand, and therefore people didn't rush into one place and physical distances could be maintained. The third was that we were trying to get people help for accessing their own entitlements. The JJSS was formed out of an effort to get NREGA functional at the grassroots level, at the village level. The National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and the National Food Security Act were actually the saviors this time in COVID, especially for the rural economy. Imagine 30 lakh and more workers coming back to a state like Bihar, and how did they deal with it? Because the economy was not ready. And NREGA played a very important role. For the ration system, maybe many of you know, but I'll still repeat, PDS ration shops, it was announced that people would get whatever entitlement they had. In addition to that, the same amount of grain they could pick up for free. So one was the subsidized grain packet that they were going to get anyway, which they paid for. And now there was a same packet that they could pick up for free. And this was recommended by the government for 2 months. But the Right to Food campaign, and in Bihar context, I can say that Professor Jean Drez and some of us together were lobbying and writing to the government of Bihar. And it has been extended till November. So this became a backbone, a real savior for people without work and stranded in their own areas. In NREGA, I can't help but go back to this story. In 2014, when the Prime Minister was making his speech, he said, NREGA, people are just digging earth, making holes, and then filling those holes. But it is these digging and filling holes, as he calls them, which I completely disagree with, which was a real savior in 2026 years after he said it was a monument of the failure of the previous government, that we had to completely bank on the NREGA to bolster the rural economy. Some good things I can tell you, and I think that link is also coming up in the chat, is the People's Action for Employment Guarantee did a Bihar tracker. And in that Bihar Narega tracker, they say that 11 lakh job cards were made in Bihar alone. And this is 14% of the total job cards that were made across the country. 34 lakh families got employment in the NREGA. Now one can say, but what is that number, 34 lakhs? I'm going to say that it is 1.5 times more than what was the number of families given work in the last 3 years. So that shows the kind of need and also a good response from an existing system. See, suddenly you can't put a scheme in place and say, now we'll create infrastructure and we'll fix it. That doesn't happen. So NREGA infrastructure existed. There were already program officers at block level and workers right up to the Gram Panchayat level. People are used to this system. And so it was a good way of dealing with this crisis. But there were also negatives. And I'm just going to highlight some other figures. It is said that 18% of all those who asked for work did not get work. Now the NREGA says that if you don't get work, we are going to give you unemployment allowance. And for one district alone, my own home district of Araria, the calculation was that everyone who asked for work and was not given work, were they to be given unemployment allowance, it will come to some 17 lakh rupees. But giving that, no, it was not given, but it has not even been calculated. as yet by the government. So they're not seeing it as their dues and not planning to give it. Now I'd like to move on to the health scenario. Now, in terms of the health scenario, we've also been working on health issues, and there's another group in Bihar that AIDS supports called CHARM, and they've also been doing some great work. So in this, we had been doing health workshops and village level meetings, talking about an understanding of health, about well-being, a person's well-being, both physical and mental. And I'm going to just put some slides here, just photos for you to see. So basically, village meetings like these small ones in which women are talking among themselves about different health issues. And then there is this exposure visit in which all the community health workers are visiting one particular district hospital. And this is where the community health workers, based on their experiences in the villages, come back and have this training. This is all pre-COVID, of course. And you can see Shakuntala from Pune here. But this is the story I really want to talk about. So what JJSS was trying to do was helping people access non-COVID related health services. So in this particular case, this person, Lakshman Shah, his foot got crushed in the tracks, in the railway tracks, and he did not have access to a healthcare center. As you may remember, OPDs were closed in the first few months. Finally, we facilitated the process of his reaching the Patna Medical College, and there he was there for about 2 months, and he was not being taken in for the operation. And finally, some of our friends in Patna helped get this story in the newspapers, and he has now been operated, and it's a very positive thing. The operation has been successful, and it is a very good feeling when you're able to do this. But it's not just this one case of Lakshman Shah. There are many more, because deliveries did happen. Children were being born, are being born. General illness, gallbladder operations, heart attack, everything, and those people need access to healthcare. But the condition of the public healthcare system, if I may just tell you about this study. So we are also part of the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan. There are many larger campaigns. I mean, there is this small part of the country that we work in, but there are these national campaigns that we are part of. And the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, or the People's Health Movement, they did 2 studies. One of these was to find out what was the condition of the PPE kits that were being provided to frontline health workers. And some of the data is actually very sad. One of the things that they talk about is that 32% frontline health workers reported not having access to N95 masks. It's very basic. And having to reuse kits without sufficient knowledge of what the basic things they had to do. There were hierarchies in access. There was another study that we have been part of, and that was the non-COVID health services during the lockdown. Some of the case studies that I told you about, we'll also have the macro data at some point. And finally, Shamla, give me an idea of how much time I have. So finally, I want to talk about this inability to access justice. Just like people are going through their own health crises, people are also going through the brunt of caste, gender, class violence. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. And I want to just go through this one story before I close my presentation for today. And this story is of a young woman. She's taken the name Khushi. Khushi was gang raped on the 6th of July in our town, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers from our home, our collective. And as friends and also as members of a social organization, we were trying to help her access the justice system. Some of you may have even heard of this story. She went to give her statement in the courts on the 10th of July. This is like 4 days after she's gone through this, this very traumatic experience. And there she broke down, but her way of breaking down was not crying, was not fainting in the room of the honorable magistrate. But she kept saying that you call my support givers so that they can be with me and they can help me understand what you're saying. And because there was going to be a lockdown in Araria, everyone was wearing masks. And so was the magistrate. And she said that from behind your mask, I can't hear you. So I don't understand what you're saying. Anyway, in this situation, her pleas for her support givers was not seen by the magistrate as pleas for help, but as a personal affront. And she, with her support givers, was sent to jail on the 10th of July. That itself is a horrid story. But what followed was even more horrid because we just could not get a hearing for them. The courts were closed. No bail hearings were happening. Even the virtual court would not hear a bail. Finally, after a lot of talk about it, became a national issue, a survivor, a gang rape survivor sent to jail with her support givers. There was finally, after 10 days of their imprisonment, that the lower court, the subordinate court in Araria, heard the bail plea of all 3 of them. The survivor was let out on bail. She's out on bail. It took us another 3 weeks to keep approaching the subordinate court in Araria, then the High Court, and then finally we knocked on the Supreme Court. And it is only on the 3rd of August, 10th of July, they were arrested. It was only on the 3rd of August that we were able to get bail for the 2 support givers, Tanmay and Kalyani, 2 very brave people who were put in for the crime of supporting a survivor. Finally, Kushi and both of them are outside. They are as well as can be after having gone through this, from survivors and victims to become further victimized. But what I want to say is that, see, here is one small case, but if you look at what is generally happening in the country, I know it may sound a little controversial, but think about it. It's so difficult to access the justice system. It's become even more COVID times. Everything is virtual. Physical courts are closed. In this situation, Bhima Koregaon has been made into one huge conspiracy case. At least 15 people of the kinds of many of us here, but definitely Balaji and Kamaini, that kind of people, somewhere there who are doing some work, good work, social work, that category of people, they are in jail. Sudha Bharadwaj is one of them. She's been in jail for 2 years now. She's an advocate. She was in the US. And she decided to come back to India and work in Chhattisgarh with the Chhattisgarh Mukti Morcha. And in UAPA, she's been charged and she's there, but she's not the only one. There are 15 of them, and there are hundreds more, maybe less prominent names that you and I will not even hear about. In addition to that, there is the Delhi riots case, the recent Delhi riots. All of you would be aware that the NPR, NRC, CA was bitterly, uska virodh hua tha. There was a lot of anger against this, and the Delhi riots happened during this time. And now you would have heard also, it's been in the media, that people are being picked up in the name of being questioned, and they're being asked to name other people, give false testimonies against others, and being told, then we will let you free if you make this testimony. And just pointing these out to you because this is a huge crisis. This is a huge crisis for a democratic country. My favorite was that when Tanmay was in prison, there was this one photo of his that I would keep looking at. And this photo was of him in a Maester colony, in a cleaning community colony, taking a pledge of the Constitution, an oath to the Constitution with little children all around. And those were the constitutional values. Those are the constitutional values we stand by. And those are being seriously challenged in our country right now. I really hope we'll be through these very difficult times, COVID, the politics, and the crisis. And we will not make more man-made crisis. I will not say people-made crisis. Sometimes I do think in a patriarchal society, it's our men who are creating a lot of problems and a lot of decision-making positions. So yeah, it's just a joke on the side. You can ignore it. Thank you very much for having the patience to hear me and having me here today. Shamla, over to you. Arvinda, yeah.
Thank you. I just feel inadequate saying thank you, but truly your courage in keeping on working in times like this, in an environment like that, and the people that you're working with, the people Balaji is working with, both of you being able to carry all that and communicate it to us. I really appreciate what you said about aid being, having this kind of solidarity in across the distance. And we always say that we're there with you in spirit, but we're really glad that you're able to be there in the time of need and be with us in the time in the time that we can share to connect with the kind of work that you're doing on the ground. I can just remember last year in the Milan, we talked about giving the gift of time. And I think if there's anything that we have learned this year, it is about how precious is our time together. And both Kamaini and Balaji sharing time this morning with all of us really inspires us to make the most of our time together. And I really, this has been a season of Zoom calls. We've had, so many Zoom calls in the past 6 months, but I think today's is one that really makes me nostalgic for the time we would have been having this Milan together. And this is around the time when, after the talks, I might be moving from table to table with a microphone to start the Q&A session. And so now we'll have to do that same kind of Q&A over the video conference. I hope people are putting some of the questions in the chat. We will come to you. We'll probably ask you to ask your questions. As you know, today we're trying to raise, we have a target of $40,000 to keep our regular work going. As Balaji so aptly put it, the regular work is also in the poorest communities. The regular work serves as a kind of relief and rehabilitation for the kind of ongoing crises. And the regular work is what allows the community organizations to be there in the time of need, to have that volunteer in every village, to communicate rapidly, to be part of the distribution, and see that the crisis doesn't get even worse than it needs to be. And so that's why today we are raising funds for our ongoing programs throughout India. Subhayan has the map, but before we get to that part, and I would also like to give the tally for what people have already donated today. Thank you so much for your generous donations, and I hope that we will soon reach the target. We have a couple of we have 2 paintings that an artist has generously donated. I'd like to invite Tulika to tell us a bit about the paintings. We are also taking bids on those paintings. It's an auction for those 2 paintings that will also benefit aid and all of the work that you've heard about. And I'm also going to acknowledge the youth who started us off today with that beautiful introduction of our project. So first, I invite Tulika to talk to us about the paintings.
Thank you so much, Arvinda. It's my honor to introduce the paintings. I think the artists are also on the call. The first painting is called Eternal Love, done by Rupa Mukherjee, who's a DC-based artist who's been painting since she was 3 years old, and it gives her a lot of inner peace. And she's kindly donated this painting for us, for any one of you to own it and have it in your walls. So please consider putting in a bid. We already have a starting bid of $200 for this painting. Thanks again, Rupa, for your donation. And we also have another painting called Knowledge. This is done by Tapas K. Ray, who's a Cincinnati-based artist who's donated this painting to us today. And this painting is inspired by wall art in Mexico. And thanks again, Tapas. I think you're also online. Really appreciate your donations. The current bid for this painting is $500. So please go ahead, and this is one aspect on which you can fight away and bid each other and outbid each other. Looking forward to a great fight to win the two paintings. Thanks, Arvinda. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Tulika, and thank you to the two artists. So I guess two lucky supporters on today's call will be able to display these paintings in the video conferences that they have in the coming months. And so we're looking forward to that. Here is the rundown of the projects that we still need to support this year. Of course, throughout the summer, most of our fundraising activity was directed first towards the COVID pandemic and also towards the cyclone, two huge disasters that took a toll. One mostly in Bengal, but the other throughout the country, on top of all of the other issues that the organizations are working on. And so now, as we kind of approach the time when we would normally have Milan look at our fundraising for the year, this is where we are. And I think today we have reached the halfway point. Oh, thank you, Lakshmi, for sharing that good news. If you're monitoring the chat, you can see that we have actually crossed the halfway point even before I had to start this fundraising pitch. I think, it is so nice to see so many familiar faces today, actually, at least familiar names. I can almost picture being in the room with everybody. And, I would just really invite anyone to share, how they felt about the presentation, share questions, and what motivates you to donate today. I know we do talk about this every time, but I think it's important to share just because it helps us to express our connection, even though we are far away. I think this is something that all of us feel that we would like also to be there, and we feel very connected to those who are there. And so this is Milan is one way for us to express that connection. So we will take a couple of questions for Balaji and Kamaini. I think we can start with Tulika again. You had a question regarding the remote education. Would you like to ask that question?
Yeah, actually, the question was really from Ambar. In Africa, radio programming is often used to convey messages and also for education. So I was just curious about that. And there was also a question about whether the government schemes are working and are families able to access the cash transfers? And if not, are you linking them? This is for Balaji.
So, actually, radio-based, there are some initiatives, not just in Africa. I think also in Pune, there has been a group which has been doing some English through radio. It's not as effective as obviously if you have a video or if you had a more visual, because a lot of learning happens through a visual process. So we have phone-based education where we have workbooks distributed. So our volunteers went in, distributed workbooks, get them into groups of 5 where there would be discussion. We have not done radio-based sessions here. I don't know how effective they are overall, though I generally suspect that at least for certain parts, certain things, just listening alone won't be sufficient. So there must be some amount of interactive learning, all video-based learning. In terms of government schemes reaching, government on certain things, it's quite efficient. Now we have to first understand, I think Kamaini mentioned this. I would like to mention that again. When we're talking about all of this, we have to understand that government really messed up. I mean, we have to actually keep that in mind. So somewhere people have forgotten the fact that there was a huge mess up that happened, because unfortunately in India, neither officers nor politicians nor the government is ever held accountable for the mistakes they make or for the decisions that they take, because the next election is completely forgotten. I mean, I'm sure that is also probably true in the US, but definitely I would say, at least in India, I can say that with a stronger way. They are not held accountable for what they do, but their decisions kill people, their decisions destroy lives, their decisions destroy the economy, livelihood completely. They mess up in big ways. They don't mess up in small ways. When we talk about people being guilty of small crimes, here we're talking about people being guilty of huge crimes across the body. You have to have the government, somebody in position of power must listen, must understand, because their actions are not affecting them. Their actions are affecting others. So in a policy situation where the people in power don't have to listen, is by definition going to have problems. Given that we live in this environment, and unfortunately we are not able to do too much about that, we have to look for bandages here and there, which will try to reduce the problem, which will try to address the problem to the extent that we can. We have to first understand that. Given this context, are there here and there certain government machinery activities, certain government officials who are functioning efficiently? Of course there are. Of course there are. Like everywhere, we managed to work with police constables, we worked with local level officers who, given that the larger level policy was bad, were trying to do some kind of patchwork. Even now we continue to work with many of them, and some of them are very, very hardworking and reasonably thoughtful people. Of course, within that also there's a lot of corruption and so on. But if you look at PDS system, like we talked to some of the officers at the senior level where some villages had not received, were not getting provisions, the shops were not shutting down. The moment we told them, within a few days, within a few hours, actually they called up the collector, and within 1 or 2 days, basically we had the problem getting solved. So there was all of this also happening. PDS, at least in Tamil Nadu, did reach to a large number of villages. So I think in all of these areas, there was seriously reasonable response. But if you see, for example, hospitals, people not having masks, sanitary workers did not have masks, they did not have even simple gloves and so on. Usually also they don't have, but even during COVID, none of these things were provided. Big hospitals which are actually focused on this, nurses did not have. Like doctors would have N95 masks, nurses wouldn't have N95 masks. Okay, they didn't have enough surgical masks to even give to patients. So we did a lot of these. But see, the point is, within the government system, you will find all kinds. You will find people who are working very hard within a very constrained system, trying to rectify things. But then you will also find some senior officers putting a lot of effort to get things done for them. And a lot of senior officers completely callous, not worried about it. That also is there. So you have both. So it is the problem is there is a policy level feedback gap. What policy does in terms of ground level reality is never going back as feedback to either hold those people accountable or even to just go back as feedback. If they make a mistake, they can just go and take the next direction without thinking. When you think about it is like saying decisions made by the CEO of a company do not affect whatever happens, loss happens, does not affect the CEO of the company. Will you think about that as being even okay in a corporate situation or in any kind of a company or any kind of situation? No, right? But in a country like this, that is the way the structure is. You are not being held accountable for policy level. If you're the topmost person is not being held accountable, you have to remember that IAS officers are not held accountable. Has been a big problem across the board for many, many things. So while we can ask whether there are certain points of the system which also do certain things efficiently, yes, there are, and some things do happen. But I find that in the government sector, post-COVID and during COVID, there were people who took extraordinary effort to do things and within the government sector, and fantastic work by them. So definitely I was in some sense lucky to interact with some of them, both at the lower level. Like for example, mask, like from Kavaripakam, we had a police officer who would take the jeep and go to Kanchipuram. We arranged in Kanchipuram, he'll go pick it up and go back and distribute. It took our people. We were able to get transport organized by the government, local RDO, basically village block level officer, who took us from village to village traveling, and would also identify people that we need to, that we have not been able to identify. They met and they would basically help us out. So there are people who have been very supportive and who have also been working themselves quite a lot, taking a lot of risks. While that is there, let us understand that these are the lower level officers in the government. Some of the middle level officers have also done a reasonable amount of work. But unfortunately, this whole thing at the top level, there has been a lot of policy level gap. And I think we have to understand that if we don't hold that accountability, this policy problem will repeat. Unfortunately, governments today are not learning from mistakes. They've made many mistakes. They're making mistake after mistake after mistake. And they know it's a mistake and they go ahead and repeat it because it does not cost them at all. Sadly, we live in a reality like that. Doesn't sound like a democracy, unfortunately. So this is the status. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I thought we should definitely talk about that as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Balaji. There was a question they wanted me to ask. First of all, they wanted to express a sympathy and solidarity for the plight of Kushi. It's very painful to hear those kinds of stories. The question actually was regarding the health work, Kamaini, that you mentioned. What has been kind of the impact of COVID on that? How is that health work going? And how are things on the health front generally?
So on the health front, I think COVID increased the work a lot, but our ways of working had to change. Like in the beginning, Shamla said, interesting and creative ways of engaging. So I think that is what happened with us also. So what photos I showed you of organized large meetings, of interactions in the hospital, those are not happening since the lockdown. But yes, there is a lot of work and it's being done in terms of all this access to non-COVID health crises or health needs of the people. We are also now planning, not in this quarter, but next year, to again initiate our trainings and continue our work with the People's Health Movement and with good organizations in the state like CHARM, which are trying to do their own thing, but can engage with the JJSS volunteer base. Yes. So I'll also talk a little. I really want to thank all of you for your gracious comments. And also, I see Somini had a question about the Nirbhaya case and how one would have thought, and even I thought things would have changed. But we must realize that Araria is another 1600 kilometers from Delhi. So yes, things in the hinterland are very different. Even in terms of the outrage, the victim being blamed is very common. She didn't want to come out with this. And the fear was Izzat Kharab hogi. Also that there was a Justice Verma committee, which was formed right after this Nirbhaya gruesome rape case that happened. And one of the things, I'll just talk about two things which we saw in this case in Araria. One, Justice Verma committee had recommended that when the survivor is giving her statement, let there be a social worker with her while giving that statement, because she needs someone to hold on to. Second recommendation was, when a judge is given a complex case and a traumatic case like this kind of a gang rape or sexual assault, then just don't look at the seniority of the judge, but look at whether they will be able to deal with such a case. And I think if both these recommendations had been taken up seriously and discussed within the judicial mahakama, this injustice that happened with the three of them would not have happened. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kamaini. I actually was having unstable internet, so I had to go off for a moment. I would actually like to acknowledge Ashish, who is the one who introduced Kamaini to AID. and they are life partners now. And I understand that, both of you, have been involved full time in this work for all of these years. And I think you mentioned that Ashish was a little under the weather now. I think he's maybe been overworking in this time, but we'd all like to extend our solidarity and get well wishes to him. I don't know if he's available to say hello.
No,
Okay,
don't
so
see
that's
him.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll please just tell him that, we do wish him well, and he should take care of himself. And Balaji, you and all of your workers also should be very careful, because apart from all of the collateral impacts of COVID, there is COVID itself, which is still rampant in India, and all of the groups that we're working with have to work under those conditions, being careful to keep themselves and others safe, even as we carry out the regular programs of work. Now, I understand that, yes, the auction is still going strong. The fundraising is still going strong. We've crossed the halfway point. I think we're at about 23,000. We have 17,000 to go. And we really need to reach that target of 40,000. But before we go on to the next question, I need to introduce a representative of our youth circles. Those of you who have participated in our past Milans would definitely remember the lively presentations of the youth circles. They are equally grappling with the kinds of issues that are facing all of us and the world. And so, it's nice to see sometimes their bold and courageous take. Sometimes we might be a slightly jaded in some areas, but we see the way that the young people are forging ahead. So without further ado, I invite Arohi to tell us a bit about what the young people have been up to. And thank you so much for the introduction that you all put together for today's program.
Well, thank you. Waiting for the presentation. Okay, hi, I am Arohi and I'm part of the Youth Circle group. We're a group of students from elementary to high school, located mostly in the Maryland, DC area. We work on various projects to create awareness on social, economic, and global issues. What we've done so far. So most recently, we've made a video to support the Black Lives Matter movement. We've also shared brochures on political candidates' view and stance on gun control. We've also volunteered at many community kitchens, and we have sent a letter to the congressman about the Green New Deal, supporting it. One of our biggest projects we've done is creating a refugee game. The whole point of the game was for people to be able to see what it's like to be a refugee and travel from Honduras to the USA for refuge. Last year, we tested the game at the AID conference just to see how the game was working out. And now we're working on a new version of the game from Syria to Europe. And we're also working on fixing up the game and making it a bit better. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Arohi. I think, unless you actually get engaged in the game Road to Refuge, you don't recognize how much it puts you in the position of someone who's actually on that road, the kind of decisions you have to make along the way, the kind of obstacles you may face, and just seeing the kinds of questions that the youth were raising in the process of developing the whole thing, and the kind of effort that they made to find out what really happens in these countries on these journeys, and what's happening in the United States that impacts the kind of life that people can hope for who are engaged in that journey, has been really eye-opening. So I really appreciate the work of the youth circles. Thank you, Arohi and Tulika, for all your work coordinating that. And I understand that Ashish is there. I'd like to invite Ashish to say hello, and we'll be taking just a couple more questions. It's almost time for us to wrap up. And I hope Lakshmi can also calculate the total. I'd like to ask one more time, join my voice to all of the other voices, thanking all of you and appreciating your donations. Please keep them coming in. Please tell your friends about the good work. We always think of you, of donors, not as some other people, but really part of the organization, sharing in our mission, sharing in trying to make the world a better place, and connecting with the people who are on the ground doing that, and giving us hope to keep up our efforts even when we can't connect in person. So our tally remains at 23,000. We really need to reach 40,000 in the next, let's say 5 to 10 minutes before we wrap up the call. And meanwhile, I just like to invite Ashish to say hello to us from Bihar. I know that he has been kind of going around continuously, and we would just like a moment to wish him well. Ashish, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Arvinda. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all here and connect offline this time. I think I heard Kamaini and Balaji's talk, so I don't have to say much. They have covered the scenario and what work we all are doing, the activist community and other groups. So yeah, wish you all the best, Arvinda, for the 40,000 goal. Hope you reach it pretty soon.
We
Thank you.
So too. Okay, we can only hear you. We can't see you. I hope you're not that sick.
No, I'm not that sick. I've been doing okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take care. We have a few more people to thank. I hear the auction on the paintings is going strong. Lakshmi, what is the latest with the painting? I see on the chat window we are up to. Subhayan, can you show us those two paintings one more time if people didn't get a chance to see the paintings? We have two paintings. One is called Eternal Love and one is called Knowledge. And the bidding is going to be closing in 5 to 10 minutes as soon as we wrap up this call. Aha, oh, there we have Eternal Love, artwork by Rupa Mukherjee, inspired by various artists, and we have Knowledge by Tapas K. Ray. So right now the bidding is at 450 for Eternal Love and 600 for Knowledge. And yeah, there we go. We do have one more question for each of the participants. I think we can squeeze in before we have to close. I think I'm not sure who's the one who asked, but generally about the government programs. Balaji, can you talk about whether people have been able to access relief and even the ordinary government programs that they're supposed to? How is that going? I know you spoke a little bit about the intense corruption, but do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah. No, basically, I think across the country, government reaching out PDS has happened during the lockdown and also post lockdown. I think that has been continuing. I don't think there has been a very serious, I mean, there is gap areas. There are people who have not got access because of ration. See, India is a huge country. So when you're talking about gaps, you're talking about millions, even in that gap. But broad level, I would say that government has delivered on providing food supplies to rural areas, to small towns, etc. We have not seen a large scale kind of drought. I mean, no, I would say this thing. So basically, large scale food scarcity kind of situation in any pocket of the country. I mean, in a lockdown like this, that itself was a scare in the beginning. Are there going to be pockets which are just going to go completely hungry as a whole area? Within villages, there are people going hungry. There are pockets, there are tribal hamlets which are going hungry. That is one thing. But imagine a block or a district itself just not having access to food. I think a lot of those things had been reasonably controlled. So that I would say has been done well. Government services in terms of midday meals and a lot of children who are dependent on food that was supposed to provided at school. I think that did not get done in most of the country. Kerala actually managed to set a reasonably good example. Unfortunately, most other places were not able to manage that. So I would say that overall, if you take on education itself, the education sector has done very badly. Private schools and so on have been conducting classes, but if you look at government sector, schooling systems have actually not provided very much. There have been a few models here and there, like TV-based education and so on. But if you're looking at government health services, while at one side the health service did kind of take up COVID relief, like you see the hospitals, doctors have been working overtime, nurses have been working overtime. I'm seeing that Stanley Medical and all these district level government hospitals as well as state level hospitals have been functioning reasonably well. But at the same time, a whole lot of precautionary measures that needed to have been done, like preparatory measures, like during lockdown, for example, whole purpose of lockdown was to prepare our health system to handle. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. I mean, there was some nonsense noise made about some trains are going to become places where people can come and stay and so on. Very little of that got done. Hospitals, the preparatory work that hospitals needed did not get done. The kind of protection equipment that was supposed to be supplied was not done. So there are huge amounts of gaps there. And sadly, a lot of people who have other ailments and the care for them has actually dropped. Earlier, government systems have been supplying. So I don't know whether to, I mean, you see the problem is when you say the health system has not delivered, we are going to go and blame the poor medical workers, and they have done a fantastic job. Again, I want to go back to the fact that policy level errors, what can people working at the next level do? They can try to cope with it. They can try to manage within that country. But the policy level gaps are policy level gaps. So they create a mess around which people have been working. I would say the government sector at the lowest level has been exceptionally doing a lot of exceptional work in spite of very bad policies that have been pushed on top of them. Huge, terrible targets, terrible preparatory activities. None of that has happened. But then the people at the ground level have managed to work in spite of that. I would say all points to the government sector, lowest level workers, corporation sweepers, amazing amount of work that they have done. But you would give them gloves, no facilities for transport, no protection. I mean, it is, I would say, the worst kind of government top level support, financing, support, preparatory activity, policy planning, nothing of any support to them. In spite of that, they did their work. This is how I would say. So I would put 0 marks for the top officials, the government politicians and ministers. But I think we should give them 100 marks for the lowest level rung of officials. So given that what the government has done, you can imagine therefore whether government services have reached, right? So that is the kind of gap that you find. So.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think that is the situation is perfectly describes the situation in so many places. And we've been hearing from our partners in Maharashtra, where we have our major health program, that this time when the community-based health work program, when the activists approached the hospital saying that, we want to help ensure that people get access to healthcare, like we want to set up a help desk in the hospital to help tell people where to go, because even that basic level of guidance isn't there. For the first time, the hospitals welcomed them with open arms. I mean, till now, it was as if, oh, these activists are kind of going to make our work harder. But this is the first time they realize the activists are going to make our work easier. They're going to make it possible for us to, deliver more than we could without them. And so in Pune and Bombay and in some rural areas, our partner Sati is putting these help desks and helplines and newsletters to try to coordinate, to kind of enable these hardworking officials at the, workers at the last mile, the doctors and nurses, the sweepers, to get, some order out of the chaos and be able to deliver the services that they're risking their lives to deliver. We have one more question for Kamaini before we close. I really need to thank some of the people who have donated today. Not everybody, will have a chance to speak. If we were there together, I'd be walking around the room with the mic. But I really appreciate Savita Srivastavaji, one of our most long-term donors, so regular, so consistent, and this year again she's come through with a very generous donation. Veda Vyas Dugirala, who's also a volunteer. Naren Subramaniam Chaganti, Subramaniam Kuppa, so many people who, have been with us year after year, all the time. We can rely on them, and that really gives strength to our organization. Maruti Lalla, Subramaniam Chaganti couldn't attend today, and Minal, who's been with us from the beginning, she also couldn't attend. I think, her daughter is starting college. And so all of that, many of us are familiar with the kind of, with dealing with all that in this, from whether it's kindergarten or PhD, everybody's got something different going on. Lalit Gupta just made a very generous donation. We've crossed 24, not yet reached 25. Like, consider this a lightning round. We really need to reach the $40,000 mark today, because how many of these kinds of fundraisers can we have? We know all of you are with us. We're going to bring one more question to Kamaini. Before that, I actually have to acknowledge, as we were talking about all of the activists who are risking their lives going around doing work under these circumstances, I just came to know that one of those activists who actually got COVID from going around doing all of this work is our very own Ashish, who was not well, but now I found out that was actually what he had. So, please stay safe, Ashish, and, please, we look forward to seeing you when you're hale and hearty. And last question, I think, for today, as we're reaching the end of our time, Saumini, you had a question for Kamaini. Would you like to come online and ask your question?
Thank you, everyone, for the kind of philanthropic work you do. My name is Shomini Chatterjee. I'm a US resident, and I've been living in this country for the last 14 years now. I'm a mother of 2 girls. So what upsets me the most is the kind of, the sorry situation or the plight of, Indian women. So as I wrote in my chat box that, Khushi's case is a glaring pointer to the lack or perhaps the complete absence of infrastructural amenities to safeguard India's women. So this is the only question I have. How do you think we can better the situation of women in India so that cases like, Nirbhaya or cases like Khushi doesn't repeat itself? Thank you.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know this is a very broad question, and this might take, hours and hours, or might, perhaps, months and years, to reach a resolution. But as a mother and as a woman, I feel that this is something that has, that upsets me the most. So I would like to kind of, initiate at least, a starting point where we can all, come and discuss that, what can we do, as women, as humans, as people, to strengthen and reinforce the constitutional remedies so that, women can live safely in the outskirts of India.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a very, it's a lot of work, and it's at all levels. But there is one thing that I've started realizing, that we need to see it all connected also. Somewhere we need to see caste, gender, the hierarchies of income, the victimization of the minority communities. If we see them all as interconnected, then I think it'll be easier for us to move forward. But definitely in this case, we have to challenge patriarchy and understand the structural reasons for why women are in the state that they are in. Once that is in place, once that understanding is in place, then we can have programs and ways of moving forward. For example, there is no doubt that the violence comes from a lack of gender sensitivity and understanding. And violence is one way of its coming out. But in a society where there is such stark discrimination, and where saying that I'm here today is a revolution, because I could have been killed in the womb, I could have been killed right after being born, I could have been killed in one of these episodes, then so it's these larger things. But I do see the work on education, the work on health as important ways of working forward, moving forward. But somewhere along the line, to save our constitutional values, I think fundamentally we have to find a way of inculcating scientific and rational thinking. And the more I think about the killings of people like Dr. Dabholkar or Kalburgi, I think why? There are a lot of people working. Why? What is it so threatening about a very ordinary person who's able to make that connect with an ordinary Marathi and say, listen, this Nibu is not going to tell the future of the baby who's born, boy or girl. And I think that rational scientific way of thinking will also do us a lot of good. Shamini, I think it'd be nice if we have this interaction also some other time. But I think fundamentally this is a very good question and a great opportunity for a person to respond to. And yeah, I think things have really improved. 200 years ago, when Savitribai Phule used to go out, she was brickbatted for just wanting to teach girl children. But today one doesn't think like that. That doesn't happen. But this happens. So things are changing. They will change, but we'll have to attack the fundamentals. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. We are going to wrap up. I'm going to give a last call for the auction. We are currently at $450 for Eternal Love. Supayan, can you show us Eternal Love? I think that is something we all need today in this world. Where is Supayan? There we go. $450 for Eternal Love. And by the way, just a reminder for everybody to see if your employer matches your donations. And, you know, we haven't mentioned monthly donations. If anybody would like to make a monthly pledge, that is definitely most welcome. And we will count 12 months worth of that pledge towards today's total, which if we include the auction bids, we have crossed 25,000. So we are on our way to 40,000, and perhaps with the matching donations, we will meet that goal today. So this for Eternal Love is at 450. This is your chance if you want to outbid. Going once, going twice. Srividya Venkatraman, you are the lucky winner of Eternal Love. Can you please come on the screen and say a few words? What has motivated you to be part of AID, to donate today? I know this is not, you have been part of AID for many years. I don't know, even perhaps decades. Srividya, are you able to come on and share a few words with us?
Yeah.
Can we have your video too?
ভালো একটা কোয়েশ্চেন করেছি না, ভালো করেছি নাকি না? তোমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছি।
Yeah, thanks Arvinda for making me feel old by saying I've been with
you were sitting there, no? So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm nothing much to say. I'm just I'm glad I had the opportunity to do a little bit of it today as well. So thanks everyone, and for those of you still on the edge, you can outbid me still.
You're so generous, Srividya.
Thank you.
I think you are the lucky winner today. Oh, yes, I've just been reminded there was one unanswered question. So before we go to knowledge, this is a very quick question, Balaji. Could you tell us how much a Eureka home costs?
So a typical Eureka home construction cost, we started at about 1.5 lakhs rupees. So now it comes to about 1.8 lakhs. I don't know if after COVID, the construction costs will, I don't know what that will be, but because we had some sand issue here, sand prices had all gone up. So till before COVID, it was 1.8 lakhs for constructing one house. So,
okay, thank you.
That is in dollar terms, we'll have to calculate and tell. But 1,000, 2,000, no, less than $2,000.
213K about.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that information, Balaji. So now we are going to look at knowledge. Subhayan, can you please, here we have the painting Knowledge from Tapas K. Roy. The winning bid at this time is $600, Roop Mahajan. Is anyone thinking about outbidding Roop Mahajan? This is the time. Can you top $600 so you can be the proud owner of this beautiful painting? $600 going once, going twice. Roop Mahajan, you are the lucky winner of this painting. Would you please come on for a moment to share what has inspired you to be part of this journey of aid with us today?
I think I'll give this podium to my wife. No. She's the one who picked that one.
Excellent.
No. Actually, we have a long history with aid. We joined in Boulder, Colorado, 20 years, 25 years ago? It had just started. The whole idea of aid had just started then. And then, of course, it really took off. And then from Boulder, we came to Blacksburg, to Virginia Tech. And then we were really, really involved. We really got into that. And of course, our daughter, Shreya really inspired us. She kept prodding us. No, I don't care how busy you are. You have to be a part of this. And then, of course, now we are here in Northern Virginia and so happy that, we have such a strong center here that we can be a part of. So it's really good. It's really
And
good.
I have defected, I'm still a faculty advisor for AID chapter in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. But after having been here, I'm attending more of these meetings than one there. So I'm going to pass that on to somebody else there. Of course, we have been working for a long time with Naga. So I think, we have, we are also working in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, with, what's the name of that? With Pankti. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for the salt workers.
Right.
So we have been working with them. And Balaji, actually, I'm an engineer by training. So we have been thinking of how we can harness technology at a very fundamental level to help some of these causes. So maybe if you are when you come to Maryland Park, College Park, we can sometimes sit together.
Very happy to.
We also have a campus in Chennai from Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So when I'm there next time, maybe we can plan to meet and find some different ways of harnessing technology at the affordable level to solve some of
That'll be great.
Whether it is water purification or it is solar homes, whatever it might be, or solar tent, whatever. So I think we would like to bring technology to the forefront. And last thing I want to mention, I think I'm taking more time than what I should, but we are going to go in a year. I think I had mentioned to some of our folks here for a $100 million grant from MacArthur grant. And there we would like to get AID, and I think I talked to maybe Lakshmi. So, if we can get some volunteers from India who can basically talk about, hey, we will be your site, experimental site for whatever areas we decide, whether it's education or health or energy, whatever it might be. So that is, I think I shared that with our chapter here. I was with Tulika.
Yeah.
Tulika. So, we would really like to sort of keep that on. The proposal will be due in a year and a half. And so, but we need to prepare right away. So, if you guys are interested at some point, we should volunteer a site from India, which can talk about many of the major issues that we want to tackle.
But meanwhile, we are excited to be the proud owner of this painting.
Yeah, this is what we really, really love about aid supporters. I mean, like I said, I mean, we are seeing that it's not just something where you donate once a year, but you really think about it. You put your heart and mind and energy into it, and you inspire new collaborations. So that's really wonderful. So I appreciate, you know, you are also been part of aid for decades. Trividya, you know, we're you know, many people on this call have actually been donating to aid year after year, and I just also before I thank all of the donors who made pledges today, I again want to thank both of the artists, Tapas Roy and Rupa Mukherjee, for joining us and for donating their art. It's so beautiful, and it really helps to make this Milan feel more like a real Milan, where we also have art, where we also have the youth circle presentations. And I just want to see whether Professor Bhagat has been able to join. I think he was there at the beginning, but I don't see him now. We of course thank Balaji and Kamaini for your time. I have to acknowledge some of the people who you know, may not, you know, have had a chance to kind of, you know, figuratively pass the mic to everybody, but you know, Ashok Rao, Shyamal Mandal, Ravi Subramaniam, Marati Lalla, and of course my roommate Pam Maxwell, who comes year after year, and who actually, Pam Maxwell last year won one of the auctions. In that case, it was a trip to visit one of our partners. I think Pam and Jane are online. I don't know if in 30 seconds, one of them would like to just say a few words about the trip that they made to India. They were in Milan in September, and they bid on the trip. They won the trip, and they went during Thanksgiving break. It was amazing. It was you know, and they got lucky with the weather. It had been raining nonstop, but then the week they were there, they got good weather. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you know, Pam, you're my roommate. I think, I mean, she was my roommate in college.
Sure.
I'd still call
Sure,
you.
I can say it was a great trip, and I think for both Jane and myself, just seeing the young women.
Hello.
There within their villages was just really inspiring. So.
Yeah, and they brought back you know, beautiful pictures and videos of their events, so of their visits. So we really, you know, we're really glad that we could make that happen, and glad that Pam joins us year after year. And now I see that Professor Bhagat has been able to reconnect. So I wanted to just ask you to say a few words as we're just about to close the call.
Well, all I can say is God bless the young people in AID. I have been privileged to work with you for close to 30 years, and I have not regretted one moment of it. We are privileged that we can make an investment in the people of India. The people who gave us birth, the people whose thousands of years enriched our lives, enriched our souls, enriched our bodies. There is no way we can ever fulfill our obligation to them in one lifetime. It will take many, many lifetimes. And having made the beginning, all I can say is, let us do anything that we possibly can to हर बच्चे का, हर महिला का, हर व्यक्ति का मान बढ़ाओ, मानवता की शान बढ़ाओ. इसी में सबकी मुक्ति है. God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Bhagat. As we close, I would just request everyone, if you could for a moment, to turn your videos on. So just for a moment, we can feel like we're all together. And
Now, before we close, please join me. Hum sab.
एक है.
हम सब
एक है.
हम सब
एक है. So
God bless you.
our total that we have reached today is just over $2,500, $2,500 and $600, $25,600. Oh, Kalpana is there. Kalpana, can you just say hello once?
Oh, hi, Kalpana. Wow.
So,
Lovely to
right,
see
those who
everybody.
want
Lovely.
to,
I kept hearing your voices, and it was great because I was just here. But it's great to see everybody also now, and and hearing Dr. Bhagat too. Although I don't see Dr. Bhagat on the screen.
He's having.
He's on the phone.
There's a phone number. Yeah.
Oh,
I am just on the phone. Kalpana, God bless you.
thank you, Dr. Bhagat. Thank you so much.
Good to hear your voice. And I was going to write to Balaji in a few minutes and tell him that it was a super pleasure listening to him. It always is. From 96 on, I have heard him many, many times, and each time it is better than the one before.
He keeps
Incredible.
improving, Dr. Bhagat. He keeps improving.
Yes, and especially when he is married to you.
Yeah, I keep working on him.
How could he not improve?
How could he not improve? Yes.
I am only hoping that this COVID will work itself out, and before long we will be able to see you guys in real life rather than on this fancy machine. Very good hearing your voice.
Yeah. It's nice to hear your voice too, Dr. Bhagat. It's been a while since we met and saw each other. So
yes, all right, very good. Take care, all of you. God bless you all.
And Savita Auntie,
okay,
it's nice
so
to see
you
you
can
too.
let's see. For the moment, I should tell you, in the last two things that we had, I was able to add $3,000. 2,000 when we talked to Malini and 1,000 when we talked to Chintan. So let me add another 7,000 now.
Oh, wow.
And make the full 10,000, okay?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bhagat. Oh, so somebody has to do the addition. I just wanted to catch.
It's so hard to add 10,000 to anything, Arvinda.
It's 10,000 today? Oh, okay, I couldn't tell.
No, it's not.
Balaji, you need to share your Ahaguru app with Arvinda.
It's 7,000. He's adding
7,000.
Okay, all right. Take care. God bless everyone.
Ashish, can you show one for? I see that you're coming in and out. I think we should all just take a moment to Ashish. Let's wish Ashish to get well soon. Ashish, get well soon.
Get well soon.
Get well. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'm doing
Okay. Thanks, everybody. It looks like we got to 32,000. So please, look for your matching donations. Reach out to your family, friends. Thanks for allowing us to have some kind of a Milan this year, and we really look forward to seeing you in the Milan next year.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Take care. God bless everyone.
Send 4 to make it 40.
Huh? What was that?
We will send 4,000 to make it 40.
Oh my goodness. We met the target. Oh, that's amazing. Yes, you see, this is it's more than just the $4,000. It's really the spirit of seeing that we meet the target, not letting us close the event without meeting the target. I just feel like giving another minute to Balaji and Kamaini each to just say, something in closing, because we met the target. In celebration, we just get to have one more minute each with our Jeevan Sathis.
I think Balaji has dropped off though. Oh, here he is. I see him now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is one big thing about aid and aid volunteers, aid supporters, donors, everybody, is the excitement and inspiration that we get when we interact with people here. There is a generosity of spirit. There is a lot of excitement in the work. It makes doing a lot of this work fun. I mean, I shouldn't use the word fun with some of the work that we are doing probably, but it is in some sense. At least you can get bogged down by looking at a lot of this. But I think the fact that you have to keep your basically yourself happy about doing some of this work. And I think that comes a lot from aid volunteers, that when you do this work, it makes sustaining something like this is something that's only possible when you enjoy the company. And I think I can say very strongly about the whole aid family, that it is wonderful company to be with, because it is constantly thinking about things, looking at different perspectives of the same thing, as well as enjoying the time that we are together. I think that's what this entire experience and journey has been. So thanks a lot for all of you for inspiring and making this whole process a lot of fun. So
thank you, Balaji. Kamaini.
Thank you. So when I was invited, and of course I was very thrilled. So I asked Shamla, can I have a virtual background? And she's like, okay, I'll check. Doesn't sound like a problem. Okay, maybe you can. And then I don't have a virtual background. But that's because I just couldn't figure out the logistics. But I do want to say that Tanmay was going to help me with it. And he thought of this line, right? They buried us, but they didn't know that we are seeds. And I feel like this is the aid community. That every time, and especially seeing the new generation, it's just so exciting. And to think that for each of us who might be sitting in prison for the Bhima Koregaon or this Delhi riots case where the young people, Devangana Kalita is still there. Safura was there, but on the plea of her pregnancy, she was let to go. That each of them will come out stronger. And I can tell you that in Tanmay and Kalyani's case, I see that strength. One month in jail, they've come out and they are stronger. So yeah, I mean, it's great to be here and to be part of this spirit and be connected despite the physical distance. It's not social distance. Thanks.
Zindabad.
Well, thanks to Subayan for all the work in the background. Shamla, Arvinda, thanks so much for coordinating.
Thank you, Tulika. Now time for the mutual thank you.
Now it's the volunteer time to take the volunteer picture.
The call is officially closed, but whoever wants to chat.
Of